playing it safe in your fantasy football draft is not going to win you a championship. So if you weren't looking to win a fantasy football championship, I guess now would be the time to click off this video. For those that want to go for it all, that want to win the big game, win the ultimate bragging rights amongst our league mates, we need to take some risks in our fantasy football drafts. I'm not going to say that this is a list that you need to draft every single one of these players, but at least try to grab some of these players in your fantasy football drafts because their upside is unmatched in the early rounds of fantasy football. We're going to go round by round and talk about who I think has the biggest upside to win us a fantasy football championship this year. Let's roll the intro. In the first round, everybody in this round has league-winning talent, right? Is that safe to say? But if there was one that stuck out amongst the rest, it would have to be Christian McCaffrey. His 2023 season was in a different world of fantasy football production, and if you can get anything close to that as your best player in fantasy football, you're setting yourself up to win a championship. It also is the biggest risk and arguably the most volatile draft pick you can make, meaning there are so many different ranges of outcomes where this can go either incredibly great for you or really bad for you as well. But this is not a video about who makes the most sense to draft in the first round. This is who's got the upside to actually carry your team and make you a difference maker. Christian McCaffrey has that. In round 2, assuming one of these high-end players that you valued as a first-round pick, like a wide receiver or maybe an Ashton Jeanty falls to you, you would take that. But otherwise, the second-round pick with the most upside in our fantasy football leagues this year is actually Brock Bowers. What Brock Bowers is going to be able to provide for you as a tight end one is like no other, considering he's going to be a positional advantage that your league mates don't have against you. Sure, you missed out on a top 10 running back or a top 10 wide receiver in the draft, arguably, for Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is as safe as a pick as you can make, and the upside for him to be even better than he was in his rookie season makes him the pick that in round 2 could absolutely carry your fantasy football team. This was a rookie tight end last year with wide receiver 1 type of volume and scored 5 touchdowns, which isn't great. I think the Raiders offense will be a lot better than what it was in 2024, though that's not saying much. It leads me to believe that there could be more touchdown opportunities for Brock Bowers this year versus last year. So because of the positional advantage that you would have if you took Brock Bowers, that's why he is the second round pick with the most upside. And if you weren't lucky enough to get a Brock Bowers, I think in round 2, Chase Brown is also a player who has a really high ceiling in fantasy just because of the PPR upside and the offense that he plays in. We know the Cincinnati Bengals throw the football a lot, and that's probably in part of their defense being so bad, but both of those things equate to more passing and receptions for Chase Brown, which if you play in a PPR is a massive advantage. The targets and receptions over a 17-game season that Chase Brown could have as the clear-cut starter could make him a top 5, top 6 running back in fantasy. We know this is an offense that's going to score touchdowns, going to be throwing the ball a lot, and could potentially be down in a lot of games. So check. We're definitely looking to draft Chase Brown in the second round if we're looking for upside. In round 3, the player with the most upside here is Omarion Hampton of the LA Chargers. If all things go right for Omarion Hampton, let's just say it's best case scenario because we're talking about the player who's going to give us the most upside. Omarion Hampton in a run-first offense with an run-first minded OC, Greg Roman, and head coach Jim Harbaugh. We've seen Greg Roman offenses before. In fact, the quarterbacks were limited to throw so much that we thought Lamar Jackson couldn't even pass the ball when he was with them in the Ravens. And we just talked about recently how they upticked their passing game in light of the fact that they had no healthy running backs last year. We're spending an early round pick on a running back, and we're just going to expect him to not be utilized all the time in a run-first offense. If Omarion Hampton could somehow keep Najee Harris away from his snap share, you're looking at a top 12 running back potentially in Omarion Hampton. Everything is perfectly in place for him to succeed. Round 4, Jameson Williams has the most upside in this tier, and I think it's simply because of the situation he's in. This is a team that, taking Ben Johnson out of this, may be inclined to throw the ball more, and we're talking about a wide receiver that's continuing to get better, and this may be the breakout year for him. J-Mo finished as the wide receiver 22 in PPR, even though he was labeled as a boomer bust wide receiver. But honestly, you would be right to say that, because in the 15 games that he played in 2024, 5 of those games he scored single-digit points, and in 4 of those games he scored 24 or more fantasy points. You could see you get the explosion of fantasy production or nothing from him. We've seen enough of those games where he absolutely shined and dominated in 24 or more fantasy point games for me to believe that maybe there is more of that out there, and continuing to see him improve as a route runner and not just be a guy that can be a burner and beat you deep. I think Jameson Williams could potentially be better than wide receiver 22. So for where you're drafting him at, if he returns that value, I think that is the biggest upside here in round 4 of your fantasy football drafts. Think about it. Someone considered touchdown or bust last year, plays 15 games, finishes as the wide receiver 22, and you don't want to use a 4th round pick on him? Round 5, I'm going to keep it 2 wide receivers yet again. The biggest upside here in round 5 is Calvin Ridley. It's crazy. I know there are a lot of quality players here in round 5 that I would argue are better than Calvin Ridley as a draft pick. Like, for example, I love the idea of drafting James Cook here in round 5. I think that's such a great pick in fantasy. We're talking about a guy that, yes, scored a lot of touchdowns last year. I feel like people are just predicting touchdown regression because James Cook has never scored that many touchdowns before in his career. Naturally, a lot of people like to be ahead and make a bold prediction, so they predict less than an absurd amount of touchdowns for James Cook. But if they're in an offense that does not throw the ball and is very successful at running the football, and this offense scores a lot of points, we know they're probably going to win 10, 11, 12 games next year. Why are we not drafting James Cook with the idea of he will score double-digit touchdowns yet again? Maybe he won't score 10. Maybe he scores 9. That's good value. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked with James Cook. Calvin Ridley has the most upside in round 5. He's getting a significant upgrade to the quarterback position compared to last year. Calvin Ridley last year, with horrendous quarterback play all season, finished as the wide receiver 28, and now we're going to draft him as the 29th wide receiver off the board with an upgrade at quarterback, and should be an upgrade in overall team. They honestly can't get much worse than they already were, even though they still would be one of the worst teams. They're at least going to be able to move the ball. I don't know if Cam Ward's going to be as good as Jaden Daniels was in his rookie season, but I think he's going to have a pretty good season, or at least have some moments where he impresses us. And that's going to be also in part of Calvin Ridley doing what he does, getting open in the middle of the field, being a playmaker. Calvin Ridley in this situation now in 2025 has a chance to be a top 15 wide receiver. So I'm going to say that in round 5, Calvin Ridley is the pick to make if you want the most upside. That's going to wrap it up for our early round picks with the most upside in our fantasy football drafts. We're shooting for the stars and we're aiming for the moon, because playing it safe is not going to win us any hardware in our fantasy football leagues. If you like this video, thought it was helpful, make sure you smash that like button for me. I would really appreciate that. And if enough people like it, I'll do a middle rounds video. I'll go through round 6 through 10, the best players with the most upside. And if you guys want more, I'll do the late rounds, but you gotta like the video. Outlier Militia, thank you guys for watching. My name is Turtle, this is Outlier Fantasy, and I will see you in the next video. Wow, you stuck to the end of this video? Thank you so much. If you're new here, make sure you check out one of these videos on the screen right now. And don't forget, before you leave, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any fantasy football videos on this channel. That's all I got for you guys. I'll see you in the next one.